Hello, folks, and welcome to episode number 30 of 11FS Spotlight. My name is David Brear, and in this weekly show, we shine a bit of a spotlight on the best and the brightest in the tech and financial services industry to try and understand what is it that gets them going, growing, and what they think the future of the industry will really look like. A big part of this show, as always, is your involvement. So if you have any questions or any comments as we go, drop them into the sidebar and we will weave them into the conversation as we go through today. On today's Spotlight, I'm delighted to be joined by Maxine Pritchard, who is the Head of Financial Inclusion and Vulnerability at HSBC UK. How's it going, Maxine? Thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
What's it like where you are? You're up North England today, aren't you? Is that right?
In the Cotswolds, so pretty much in the middle of the country, and it's gloomy and rainy and quite cold actually for a May day. Well, so yeah.
Well, there's lots of nice open space to have a wander about, at least, isn't there? You getting good breaks out in the greenery, which is nice. On today's show, what we're going to be doing is talking about Maxine's role at HSBC and the work that actually we see unfolding with regards to financial inclusion. Because I mean, financial inclusion is a topic I think lots of people have sort of said, but it's just got so many different layers in terms of actually all of the opportunities that there are in the industry to really help serve people more. Maybe if we start off, Maxine, with a little bit about your role at HSBC. Tell us more about what's sort of entailed with that.
Yeah, sure. So at HSBC, we really don't want to people to be left behind. We want to make sure that we're not yet another barrier in what can often be very difficult circumstances for people. And we want to make sure that we offer the right support to people at the point that they need it, whether that's when they're facing a bereavement, a relationship breakdown, or other vulnerable circumstances. So my role looks to ensure that vulnerability considerations are really embedded and part of everything that we do across the whole organisation. So really making sure that culture is changed around how we view what we need to do to support people, whether that is the customer service on the front line, or working with product managers to make sure that the products and services are designed and offered in the right way to support people. And then we also, as a team, we also identify perhaps where we're not quite getting things right, and where we need to do more, and perhaps where there's gaps and people remain excluded, and look to find initiatives to plug some of those gaps.
Fantastic. I mean, it's like you say, it's a continually evolving thing, isn't it? Every time things change a little bit in the industry, or the market changes, or I mean, a global pandemic come along, then vulnerability and inclusion, the definitions around these things need to keep evolving, don't they? I mean, we'll come to that in a little bit more detail as we go, in terms of specifically what HSBC is doing in it. But I mean, how did you get to do this role then? Because I mean, in the banking context, I mean, this is a really interesting one, because you're setting out to help people. But what got you to do this job? Because I imagine there's a lot of people who would fancy this role.
Yeah, and there, we do get a lot of interest in the role, and rightly so. I suppose once I realised that I wasn't going to make it as a ballerina, I had to look at what else could I do, and my passion really is people, and looking at how we can make a difference in people's lives. Sadly, when I was in my early 20s, my dad was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and sadly passed away shortly after. So I really saw kind of firsthand the devastating impacts it has on a family. Even now, I can feel my throat tightening as I'm talking about it. So not just the emotional impacts, but the financial impacts. Lots of additional costs, like making sure the right equipment's available, making sure that there's the right healthy nutrition, hospital visits. And that's just one situation that I'm talking about here. And then, of course, after he passed, then the complexities of dealing with lots of different financial organisations at a time when that's absolutely the last thing you want to be doing. So really, I kind of have been able to see sort of firsthand the impacts of when you can make it easier for somebody.
It's so hard that, and it's a hard story from your own personal perspective as well, isn't it? Often people are asked the most of when they're at their worst, aren't they, in terms of the requirement to be like super organized or really on top of everything, when actually the financial services side of your life is the least of the things that you're really sort of prioritizing. But I mean, that's so relevant to what's happening today as well. Obviously, with everything that's happened with the pandemic, then people's lives have really been sort of turned upside down, haven't they?
Upside down.
Unemployment, and there's been sadly lots of deaths happening. So actually being able to deal with normality at its best is difficult. But with all of these changes, then that complexity is just getting more and more significant. Talking, I guess, a bit more about that in the sort of HSBC context. I mean, this is something that I've seen more and more from you guys. I mean, really over the last 3-4 years, you guys have dialed this up more and more, and being able to do more in the community, being able to do more in this space. I mean, how has this become more and more of an important sort of agenda item within HSBC?
Yeah, and I think that's it. The change I've seen in my role in the 5 years that I've been doing, I've been working in this area. There has been so much significant change, and absolutely in the right direction all across the industry, including the regulator, and obviously within HSBC, within HSBC itself. I think there's a much increased understanding of what we mean by vulnerability, what we mean by exclusion, and what our role is as a financial service provider to make sure that people aren't facing those barriers and aren't excluded.
Well, I know it's one of the one of the sort of ways in which you structure that. You talk about making financial services accessible to as many people as possible, improving lives and making our community stronger in the process. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when people talk about, I'm sure when you sort of go and talk to your friends, or and people are like, politely or otherwise, because some people just say it politely, don't they? But so what do you do? And you're like, well, I work in financial inclusion. They're like, so you sort of help people in Africa, is it? But it's like, it's not. It's like, actually, this is, being included is everybody in everyday life, isn't it? And actually thinking about the products that you offer, the ways in which you communicate, the plans that you put in place to really do those things. So what does that roadmap look like? How does that sort of set out then in terms of what you guys are doing at HSBC to sort of bring that to life?
Yeah, so I mean, like I say, we've come a long way. So over the last few years, be that a huge training program across the whole organisation, regardless of role, regardless of grade, regardless of what function you work in, trying to upskill and bring that awareness to everybody, and that everybody has that consistent understanding, whether that is making sure that our system capabilities can record information when customers tell us about their circumstances and what their needs are, so that we can tailor our service according to their need, and they don't have to tell us every time that they contact us a requirement that they have, whether that is setting up specialist support teams. So we've got a whole great suite of different teams that will support at different stages. So a huge sort of structural changes, and then as well, looking at how we can help people that have been excluded traditionally from the financial system, whether that is those without a fixed address, so perhaps in a homeless situation, survivors of modern slavery, human trafficking, or looking to support people through the independent service, where we look to help keep people independently banking for as long as possible, even once their mental capacity might be reducing. So we want to offer a service that then can sort of keep them back and keep them in normal society for as long as possible.
Yeah. So one of the, you touched there on something actually, the concept you guys have got, HSBC UK's Survivor Bank. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because actually, I mean, the scheme's super interesting and looks like it's really having an impact.
Yeah, definitely is. So we working with Salvation Army, who have the Home Office contract to support victims of modern slavery and human trafficking on a wider scale. So supporting through finding accommodation and sort of working with that individual to find the best rehabilitation program for them. We worked with them to really understand what the barriers are that people would face in opening an account. You know, as a bank, we thought we'd got an answer. We thought with the basic bank account and the different identification documents that we can accept, we thought we'd got an answer, but actually the reality of that was not what people were facing. So we worked with the Salvation Army to really understand what those challenges were, and then we worked together to kind of come up with a solution that we could both that would work for both of us. So for those who don't have identification or address verification documents, they're able to use a letter from the Salvation Army, from that caseworker that's worked very closely with them to get a good understanding of their circumstances. They provide a letter that we can then use to open a bank account, and that acts as both their identity documents.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it's fantastic because, as you said there, on the proof of identity part, actually that causes not just identity more broadly, but as you say, dress. I mean, that can cause so many difficulties, can't it, if you're in a vulnerable situation? You're also, I think you've partnered with Shelter UK, is that right? Can you expand on that a little bit? Because I guess it's a similar use case, but the impact of that is really significant if you can't prove it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So like you say, it's very difficult to prove your address if you haven't got the money available to have your own accommodation, or your circumstances don't allow for you to have your own accommodation, and you get stuck in a very difficult cycle. And very similar to the work we've done with Shelter, we took the work that we'd already done with Salvation Army, and then we looked to see what other groups can we support, and so identified that people who are homeless, and we're not just talking about the obvious rough sleepers here. We're talking about people that don't have permanent accommodation, and perhaps are sofa surfing, and you're probably aware through the media that this has been an increasing problem throughout the pandemic. Whilst we've helped people to come off the streets, there are more people moving into that not having a permanent home circumstance. So the scheme works in the same way as it does with the Survivor Bank program, in that we're able to work with the charity and use their verification of the individual to then open a bank account. So they'll come into a branch with a caseworker, and we're able to support them through that account opening. And I think, you know, with this, we've now opened over 900 accounts through the Survivor Bank program, and over 800 through the No Fixed Address program, and a large percentage of those have been through the pandemic. So we've been able to continue to offer that service at a point where services have increased because of various reasons. And we kind of recognize that we're part of a jigsaw. We're part of that rehabilitation. We're not the answer, but we're no longer a barrier for people. So they're able to then take those next steps in looking for making sure that they're getting the right benefits, or having a salary paying into their bank account. And then just very simple things like using public transport. You can now tap to use public transport. So it really does open up a world into society that perhaps they were cut off from previously.
Yeah, not having a bank account is, I mean, it is a hygiene thing, isn't it? That gives you access to so many other things in society, isn't it? I mean, but both of those things, as you say, are sort of changing rules slightly from an internal organizational perspective in order to almost risk profile people differently. And actually, I mean, there's sort of a good argument, and I could imagine sitting in many a meeting in various different banks where I'm like, actually, no, if we can't KYC people properly, and we can't prove this and we can't prove that, and we don't have a paper document for address or your last Vodafone bill or whatever, like, actually, is those barriers of sort of risk and technology, if that's been what has been sort of holding us back in this space, do you think?
Yes, and I'm sure for in part for the right reasons. You don't want to cause vulnerability elsewhere by trying to open up and being inclusive. What happened with both of these services? Obviously, we had lots of internal discussions. Everybody was pulling in the same direction, so it wasn't the conversations haven't been why shouldn't this work. It's been how do we make it work? How do we work within the constraints, if that's the right word, of rules, but also make sure that we're finding a solution. And I think that's absolutely the difference. If you've got people working against you, you can find a million reasons not to do something. If everyone's pulling in the same direction and looking to everybody that we spoke to, yeah, you're right, it's not right that they can't have a bank account, right, how do we make this work? And that's the key change. That's the difference that is made when everybody's pulling in the same direction.
So maybe sort of stepping back from that, and it's great that these initiatives they really sort of build momentum, and actually both from an external perspective in terms of what can be done in the organization, but and can be done in the industry, but actually from an internal perspective as well, actually your teams, your organization feeling pride in actually what is changing and how the industry is changing. If you're driving that agenda, then actually it's great to be a big part of that. But financial inclusion, I guess, has a much bigger picture, doesn't it, in terms of the opportunities that financial services does have an opportunity to solve. I mean, we've talked about it a little bit, but inclusion and exclusion sort of get used reasonably interchangeably as sort of terms. But where do you sort of draw the barrier there between what is financial exclusion and what isn't, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, I interchange those words within the same sentence sometimes, so that's how kind of interchangeable they are. So really, at its rawest, it's making sure that people have access to the financial system and they're able to have a bank account. That's its very, very basic access into the financial system. But then once in that financial system, the services, the products, the channels, they all have to work so that anybody can use, anybody is able to access those services. And there shouldn't be barriers due to somebody's personal circumstance that mean that they can't do something that they would like to do, obviously within the realms of making sure that people aren't taking products that aren't suitable for them, and that could lead to different difficulties later on. But really kind of looking at the full life cycle of somebody, and making sure that those services are accessible throughout.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because as you say that, I mean, I think you're going to need a small army of people for this one. Like if you don't have enough people in your team, now's the time to make the call for it on this, because I'm sure people at HSBC are watching right now. But because that impacts everything through all of the different slices of what HSBC does and how that. So really, I think it's interesting. You know, we've seen a sort of a digital revolution where everybody needed a digital strategy. And as we progressively get more digital, we don't need so many more digital strategies because we are digital. I mean, do we need an inclusion strategy now? But arguably, as inclusion becomes more and more part of everybody's role, because it's thinking about the words we use, the way we engage, and actually, it's almost it's as much a mindset as it is a department, isn't it? In that sense. Then, you know, your ultimately, I don't want to try and get you to do yourself out of a job here, but really your role is to make this part of everybody's job at HSBC, not just yours, isn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly that, and success is when I don't have a job. I would be gutted, but yeah, that is exactly what we look to do, and making sure that everybody, regardless of what their role is, regardless of whether they're talking directly to customers or they're building products or they're checking, you know, a governance function that makes sure that we're doing things in the right way, everybody has a responsibility to think about customer. There is no such thing as perfect. People go through different experiences in their life that will change their circumstances. That is just life. And the more we make sure that our services offer that and adapt to those circumstances, that's when we've got inclusion. There'll probably always be the need to look further and think what's the next thing and who is still being left behind. But if you can open the doors to as many people by your own role, then that's what is success.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. I mean, you touched a little bit on, you know, we've covered a few different types of groups, but I mean, is there any particular groups that are excluded, or is this more of a actually moving away from sort of generically thinking about people to more specifically thinking about people? Because the needs of different demographics, the needs of different groups, even, you know, down to religious beliefs in terms of the requirements around different types of financial services rules and regulations. Actually, all of these things need to be thought about in order to be able to, you know, you hit the nail on the head there in terms of services, you know, financial services, and this is all about being able to provide the right type of service to the right type of people, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think if you go down the route of trying to address each situation, each condition, each circumstance, we'll take forever. we won't ever get there, and we'll always be missing something. So what we try to do with our solutions is kind of try to think of as many different circumstances as possible, and adapt and make sure the service is suitable for sort of plugs a gap for lots of different situations, rather than concentrating on just one demographic or one area. Sometimes it can be helpful to start there. So I mentioned the independent service earlier on, and what that does, it means that people can kind of retain access to the financial system, but they've got somebody else looking after them. They've got somebody else there to keep the rest of their finances protected. Now we designed that in partnership with Alzheimer's Society a few years ago now, but actually the impacts and the reach for that service not only help people with dementia, but all sorts of different circumstances, autism, brain injury, lots of different situations that actually meant, or even addictive behaviour. It's safer for me to have somebody else looking after all of my other finances, and I'll just have a basic bank account. Loads of different situations that service can then support, and that's what we try and do.
Yeah, it is, like you say, it is almost endless, isn't there, in terms of the different and obviously we're in the middle of Mental Health Awareness Week. Different mental health disorders can actually require very different control frameworks around financial services. I know, friends who will be in different situations from a mental health perspective, which will dramatically affect their outlook on their financial life. So it's interesting, isn't it? And one of the things, co-founder of 11FS, Jason Bates, has had on his agenda for a very long time is a bank for the blind. So if that comes to the top of your agenda, do let me know on that one. But what's next then? Because obviously, like you say, the backlog for all of the different people in society and all of the different use cases you could support, like I say, is sort of reasonably infinite at this stage in terms of what. And actually, as the world changes and things keep evolving, then that will continue. But what's next on your agenda?
And we're constantly looking for new ways to do things, new solutions, new initiatives, whilst also making sure that we continue to embed that cultural shift and that wider sort of structural support that we have in place. So not just always looking at specific initiatives. So yeah, there's always plenty on the horizon that we're working on.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We do a lot of work with things like jobs to be done frameworks and actually getting to grips with the brutal realities of day-to-day lives for people. There just must be so many amazing insights that come out of engaging with people of different backgrounds and different circumstances to really understand the ways in which you can support them. But it's look, this is a great job you've got, Maxine. It must be easy to get out of bed in the morning to come in and really sort of focus on helping people, and that's a great thing to do. It really is.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a lovely job. I take so much pride in the work that me and the team do and that we do as an organisation. So yeah, it does, like you say, it makes it easy to get out of bed in the morning.
Very good. I'm afraid that's all. I think we could probably go on for another couple of hours on this one because I think there's just so many different layers on it. But that's all the time we're going to have in the show today. Okay. Maxine, thank you very much for joining us. Where can people learn a little bit more about everything that you're up to with this role and more broadly HSBC?
Yeah, so lots of information on our website, on our public website, hsbc.co.uk. Also, it's probably worth following, if you don't already, following HSBC on LinkedIn. So there's lots of different areas that get talked about through the LinkedIn channel. So I'd say those are the two best places to go to.
Very good. Okay, guys, that's all we have for you this week. Make sure you follow 11FS pretty much on every social media channel at this stage. And don't forget to head over to the 11FS YouTube channel where you can catch up on all of the previous episodes of this show. Hope you had fun. Hope you enjoyed this topic. See you soon. Goodbye.